Welcome to Vault of Words, a place where centuries of human thought are opened through the voice of AI. Tonight we open another page and step quietly into the mind behind it. There are two forces that shape every life, though we rarely notice them until they collide: chaos and order. One is the unknown, the realm of potential, the wild ocean that swallows certainty whole. The other is structure, the stable ground beneath your feet, the rhythm that keeps your heart aligned with something steady. You live between them, whether you realize it or not. One step into chaos when you risk, one step into order when you build. Every moment you speak, act, or even breathe, you negotiate this fragile boundary. Too much order, and your life hardens into repetition. Too much chaos, and you dissolve into confusion. Balance is not found. It's maintained, endlessly, through attention, humility, and courage. The 12 rules are not laws to obey, but tools to walk that tightrope, to bring structure to the storm, without killing the spirit that creates. This is the story of how we learn to live, not by erasing chaos, but by dancing with it. Every civilization that ever rose out of the dirt began by naming its rules, its pillars of order, because humans have always known that life without structure is unbearable. The storm of chaos is not merely outside you, it lives within you, whispering impulsive thoughts, pulling you toward distraction, decay, and self-deception. To live without principles is to surrender to that storm, but to live bound by rigid dogma is to suffocate under your own certainty. The balance lies in learning to build structure strong enough to stand, but flexible enough to breathe. Every rule for life begins not as a commandment, but as a story. When you decide to stand up straight with your shoulders back, it's not about posture, it's about dignity. It's about telling the world, I'm ready to bear the burden of my existence. The human spine evolved to lift the weight of life itself. When you stand upright, you remind yourself that chaos is manageable. The dragon at the door of your future can be faced, not with arrogance, but with courage shaped by awareness. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. Another rule, but truly a mirror. You would never neglect a loved one the way you neglect yourself. You would not speak to a friend with the same venom you use in your inner dialogue. Why? Because compassion without self-care becomes hypocrisy. To restore balance, you must begin at the smallest level, feeding your body, tending your mind, allowing the same grace you give to others. This is how order begins, not in grand philosophy, but in quiet daily repair. And then make friends with people who want the best for you. It sounds simple, but the human mind is drawn to familiarity, even when that familiarity destroys it. We cling to those who reflect our weakness, because it feels safe. Yet the truth is, growth demands discomfort. Chaos surrounds you, but the right people help you navigate it without losing direction. Friendship, when genuine, is the bridge between your inner storm and outer order. It is not comfort alone, it is shared accountability. The rules unfold this way, each one a thread, weaving a net, strong enough to hold your life together when the winds come. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today. This rule protects your mind from envy's corrosion. Modern life, drowned in images of perfection, feeds chaos disguised as aspiration. You chase what isn't yours, and in doing so you lose sight of the ground beneath your own feet. But progress is personal. Growth measured by comparison is illusion. Growth measured by integrity is truth. And so the pattern continues. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Lies are subtle weapons of chaos. Every falsehood you tell fractures your foundation, until the world no longer mirrors what is real, but only what is convenient. To lie is to betray the delicate balance between order and chaos, replacing reality with fantasy. Truth is painful, but it cleanses. It restores the link between your perception and the world itself. Without that link, you drift, unanchored, adrift in noise. Pursue what is meaningful. not what is expedient. Expedience belongs to chaos. The quick fix, the temporary relief, the avoidance of suffering, meaning, belongs to order, the act of voluntarily accepting responsibility, even when it hurts. Meaning, transforms suffering into structure. When you carry a heavy load willingly, it becomes purpose. That's why rules exist, not to restrict life, but to give it a shape that can endure the storms it was born from. Every rule, every boundary, is a quiet declaration. I will not let chaos devour me. But paradoxically, the healthiest rules invite a little chaos in. You clean your room not to banish disorder, but to create a sanctuary from which you can safely face it. You tell the truth, not to dominate others, but to confront the chaos inside you. You take responsibility, not to please the world, but to build a place where you can stand tall. The rules are not cages. They are instruments of alignment, tools that tune your life to the rhythm of something greater. You follow them, not because they make you good, but because they keep you balanced enough to handle both good and evil without becoming either entirely. The storm never ends, but the rules keep your hands steady on the wheel. To live by principles is not to escape chaos, but to engage with it skillfully. The goal is not peace without conflict, but meaning that survives the storm. Because one day, when your world cracks open again, and it will, it's not the absence of chaos that will save you. It's the discipline you've built, the small truths you've practiced, the quiet courage you've nurtured in silence. These are your weapons, your anchors, your map, through the dark, and through them, the balance holds. Before the first word was ever spoken, before humanity carved meaning into sound, there was only movement, the slow, silent trembling of existence, dividing itself into two. The ancients didn't have microscopes or psychology, but they understood something we've almost forgotten, that the world began not from harmony, but from tension. Chaos and order, twin forces that shaped everything you've ever known. Chaos, the unpredictable expanse of potential, raw and untamed. Order, the sacred structure that holds it all together. They are not enemies, though they often appear so. They are the inhalation and exhalation of the universe, the pulse that beats beneath every heartbeat. In myth, this truth was hidden in stories. The Egyptians told of Ran's daily battle against the serpent, Apep, light struggling against the endless dark. The Greeks spoke of Gaia and Uranus, of titans born from the void. In the East, yin and yang swirled endlessly, neither victorious, neither destroyed. Chaos was never evil, and order was never perfect. They were reflections of one another, partners in an eternal dance. The moment one tried to dominate, the world fell out of rhythm, and so too do we. In our lives, order gives comfort. It's the morning routine, the familiar street, the job that pays the bills. It's the known territory, the map you've already drawn. Without it, you'd wander endlessly, unanchored. But chaos is what breathes life into that structure. It's the unknown conversation, the risk you take, the heartbreak that rearranges your soul. Chaos destroys, yes, but it also creates. It is the fire that forges something new. Without it, you'd never evolve. Without order, you'd never survive. The balance between them isn't static. It's alive, like the tide that advances and retreats. The line between chaos and order moves through every choice you make. The moment you cling too tightly to certainty, chaos arrives to humble you. The moment you drift too far into chaos, order reappears to ground you. This balance exists in your relationships, your work, your beliefs, your inner dialogue, even your heartbeat. Expansion and contraction mirrors this eternal motion. You are in every sense built upon their conversation. Modern psychology calls this dance individuation, the lifelong act of integrating opposites. Carl Jung wrote that to live fully, you must not banish chaos, but learn to carry it consciously. The hero's journey, the artist's creation, the scientist's discovery, all are born at the border, where the unknown meets the known. That's why we find beauty in art and awe in nature. Both reveal how chaos and order intertwine. A painting without form is noise. A life without risk is decay. Every rule we live by, whether moral, spiritual, or personal, is an attempt to stand at that edge without falling. The 12 rules for life, at their core, are not about control. They are reminders that meaning arises not from perfection, but from balance. To clean your room, to tell the truth, to stand up straight. These are not commands for obedience, but practices for aligning yourself with the rhythm of reality. Because chaos will always return. It always has. The point is not to eliminate it, but to let it shape you without consuming you. And that, perhaps, is the first truth, hidden in all creation stories. The world was never meant to be purely ordered. Too much order becomes tyranny, a sterile repetition that kills imagination. Too much chaos becomes madness, a flood that washes away meaning. Between them lies the fragile space where life happens. The ancient dance still continues, not in myth, but within you, in your choices, your failures, your small acts of courage. Every time you step forward into the unknown, every time you rebuild after falling apart, you take part in that same eternal rhythm. You are not the spectator of this dance. You are the dancer. The point where chaos becomes order, and order breaks open into chaos again. The ancients called it fate. Modern thinkers call it growth. But beneath all names, it is one truth. Life exists only in the balance between what you can control and what you can never understand. Every moment of life is a negotiation between what is and what could be, between order's structure and chaos' call. You wake each day facing that choice. Whether you notice it or not, every decision, no matter how small, tips the balance in one direction. You choose to wake on time, or stay in bed. You choose to speak with honesty, or to hide behind convenience. These choices seem trivial, yet they form the architecture of your soul. The world may be vast, but meaning grows only in the soil of small, deliberate acts. To live is to choose, and every choice carries its weight. Freedom without responsibility is chaos. Responsibility without freedom is tyranny. The balance, again, lies in the middle path, the narrow line where your actions create purpose, without destroying your humanity. That's why rules matter. They remind you that every decision is sacred. They are not there to limit you, but to remind you that life itself is a moral act. Each rule is a mirror, reflecting your integrity. The more you align your actions with truth, the more your reflection steadies. Modern life tempts you to believe that meaning can be outsourced to systems, trends, or even other people. But meaning is personal labor. It's carved through reflection, suffering, and choice. When you decide to take responsibility for your body, your words, your relationships, you reclaim authorship of your existence. You stop being a victim of chaos and become a craftsman of order. That is why people feel lost without purpose, because chaos, unchallenged, whispers the lie that nothing matters. But meaning does not appear magically. It must be wrestled from chaos with both hands. The weight of meaning can be crushing. To hold it, you must also accept your fragility. That's the paradox. Meaning is forged in vulnerability. When you face what you fear, when you take responsibility even for what wasn't your fault, you gain strength that cannot be given or taken away. You begin to see that your suffering isn't punishment. It's initiation. It's how the soul grows, not in comfort, but in confrontation with the parts of life you'd rather avoid. Every culture, every philosophy has whispered the same truth in different tongues, that chaos is not your enemy, but your teacher. The storms of your life reveal what is weak so that it can be rebuilt. The pain you carry teaches you where your limits end and where your courage begins. In that sense, every tragedy conceals instruction. Loss teaches gratitude. Failure teaches humility. Loneliness teaches self-awareness. You don't escape pain by running. You transform it by giving it purpose. Consider this. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, yet meaning appears only where consciousness chooses to care. When you choose to care about your health, your work, another person, you create order from nothingness. That is the miracle of being human. You don't find meaning. You make it one choice at a time. And every time you act with integrity, in a world that rewards indifference, you strike a blow for order against chaos. But balance demands honesty. Even order can become dangerous when worshipped, when rules harden into ideology, when certainty replaces curiosity. Chaos returns in rebellion. Life resists perfection. The moment you try to make it predictable, it changes shape. That's why humility is vital. To know that you don't control the dance, you only participate in it. True wisdom lies not in conquering chaos, but in learning to move with it, to accept that some questions have no answers, and some losses no redemption, yet to keep walking anyway. Meaning, then, is not found at the top of a mountain, but in the act of climbing. It's in the quiet discipline of showing up, again and again, when no one is watching. It's in the forgiveness you offer, when your pride aches. It's in the truth you tell, when a lie would be easier. Each small act aligns the world a little closer to harmony. It's not glamorous, but it's real, and it's the only balance that lasts. You will fail, of course. You'll lose balance, fall into chaos, forget the rules. Everyone does. But failure isn't the end of the story. It's how you learn the weight of what matters. The moment you stand back up, the rules return to life, not as commandments, but as companions. They remind you that every time you choose what's right over what's easy, you participate in something timeless, the ongoing creation of meaning from disorder. And so, reflection becomes revelation. You see that the balance between chaos and order is not a destination. It's a lifelong motion, like breathing. You inhale discipline, you exhale courage, you learn to trust that both are necessary. The rules don't save you from life. They teach you how to live it with your eyes open, and that is the quiet miracle. The storm never ends, but you can learn to stand within it without losing your balance. Silence is not the absence of noise. It's the space where meaning begins to echo back. Beneath all the noise of modern life, the screens, the schedules, the endless performance of productivity, there is a quieter voice that rarely gets heard. It speaks not in words, but in weight. It says, "You are out of balance." It's the moment your breath feels shallow for no reason. The night you lie awake without knowing why. The faint unease that comes when you've done everything right, yet feel nothing at all. That's not failure. It's a message. It's chaos knocking, asking to be remembered. You learn, slowly, that balance is not control, it's acceptance. To balance is to acknowledge both your light and your shadow, the part that strives to improve, and the part that secretly sabotages. You are not one or the other. You are both endlessly negotiating. True peace comes not from silencing chaos, but from listening to what it's trying to say. Maybe it's telling you to grow. Maybe it's warning you that you've become too rigid. Maybe it's simply reminding you that you are alive. Most people try to drown that silence. They fill it with distractions, with goals, with noise. But silence, uncomfortable as it is, carries the lessons order cannot teach. It shows you what you've avoided, what you've buried beneath routine. It reveals that the true war between chaos and order is fought not in the world, but within the mind. The external world only mirrors the internal one. When you're at war inside, even peace feels threatening. When you find inner balance, even storms look like rhythm. The silent lessons often arrive disguised as pain. The relationship that breaks you teaches vulnerability. The failure that humiliates you teaches humility. The loneliness that haunts you teaches self-reliance. These lessons whisper only when the shouting stops. Pain, in its rawest form, is not chaos's punishment. It's its language. It tells you what is unhealed, what part of order you've built on unstable ground. And if you listen long enough, even suffering begins to sound like instruction. In silence, the mind begins to reveal its structure. You see how fear disguises itself as logic, how pride hides behind certainty, how chaos isn't just external disorder, it's internal confusion. The human psyche is layered like a labyrinth. Some parts crave freedom, others crave security. You live at their intersection. To deny either is to fracture. To embrace both is to integrate. That's why reflection matters. It lets you look into the depths without flinching. Stillness doesn't mean stagnation. It's the preparation before movement. The bow must be drawn back before it releases the arrow. Similarly, the self must retreat inward before it can expand outward. That retreat is not escape. It's recalibration. You pause, not to quit, but to return stronger, clearer, more aligned with what matters. The stillness between breaths sustains the breath itself. Inner balance requires honesty, the hardest kind, the one that strips away all illusions. You realize that much of what you call order is just avoidance. You follow routines, not out of purpose, but fear. You cling to relationships, not out of love but dependency. You stay busy, not out of passion, but panic. Real balance begins when you start removing what's false. When you learn to sit in the silence of who you are, without performance, without apology, without needing to prove your worth through noise. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when you realize that balance isn't something you find once and keep forever. It's something you practice every day, every choice. You lose it, you regain it, you lose it again. The process is the point. Just like walking, you're constantly falling and catching yourself. That's what growth feels like. Not perfection, but adjustment. When you finally begin to live with that awareness, chaos loses its terror. You stop fearing uncertainty because you recognize it as the birthplace of transformation. You stop resenting order because you understand it as the framework that lets beauty exist. You no longer need extremes to feel alive. You become both, chaos and order, storm and structure, wave and shore. The mind steadies, the heart softens, and the silence that once frightened you becomes home. And in that stillness, you hear something ancient, the pulse that all wise people have felt since the beginning of time, the knowing that life itself is not about winning against chaos, but learning its rhythm. Every breath you take is that balance. Inhale, exhale, tension, release. It's not a rule, not a commandment, but the quiet truth behind them all. You are not here to conquer chaos. You are here to understand it. The ancient myths called it the serpent eating its own tail, the eternal return. Science calls it entropy and evolution. Spiritual traditions call it awakening. But beneath every name, it is the same motion. Chaos dissolving into order, order breaking open into chaos, again and again. That is the pulse of reality, the heartbeat of being. You cannot escape it, because you are it. Every cell in your body lives and dies in rhythm with it. Every thought forms and fades within it. Even your identity, the self you cling to, is just one brief configuration before it shifts again. In the end, the balance between chaos and order is not a philosophy. It's the quiet choreography of existence itself. You live within it every day, often without realizing it. You make plans, and life interrupts them. You fall apart, and somehow rebuild again. You lose what you thought you needed, only to find that its absence shaped you more than its presence ever could. This rhythm, collapse, rebuild, repeat, is not a punishment. It is the pattern that keeps life alive. You were never meant to conquer life, only to participate in it consciously. The rules, the disciplines, the rituals, they are scaffolds that let you stand upright amid the storm, but they are not the goal. Order is a vessel, not a destination. Once it becomes rigid, it must be broken. That's why change feels like destruction, because every transformation requires the death of an old order. The version of you that began this journey is not the one reading these words now. You've already changed, quietly, in the space between each breath. The greatest mistake is to believe that chaos is the enemy. It isn't. Chaos is the unknown that allows new life to grow. It is the dark soil beneath every seed, the uncharted water that carries you to shores you could never map. Without chaos, there would be no discovery, no creativity, no rebirth. But equally dangerous is the temptation to worship chaos, to abandon all structure in the name of freedom. That path leads to fragmentation, to the erosion of meaning. Too much order, and you suffocate. Too much chaos, and you disintegrate. The balance, once again, is sacred. And so, balance becomes not something you achieve, but something you remember, like the rhythm of walking, like the way the body knows how to breathe. Even when the mind forgets, you fall, you rise, you adapt, you build habits that give you strength, but remain humble enough to let them evolve. You hold your beliefs lightly, like a flame, close enough to feel its warmth, never so tightly that it burns you. The quiet truth is that no one masters this balance. Even the wise stumble. Even the disciplined falter. Perfection has never been the point. Awareness that you are not separate from the storm, but part of it, that chaos and order are not forces outside of you, but the two halves of your own consciousness, forever intertwining. The balance is not an achievement to display. It's a way of seeing. If you look closely, you'll notice how the smallest acts reflect this truth. Cleaning a messy room, calming a racing thought, saying something kind when anger is easier. These are not small victories. They are sacred reconciliations. Each one turns chaos into order, and each failure to act invites chaos back in to remind you to begin again. The universe does not punish or reward. It mirrors. Whatever balance you hold within becomes the world you perceive. Eventually, you stop trying to choose between chaos and order. You start listening to both. You understand that structure gives chaos something to dance with, and chaos gives structure something to live for. You no longer fear the breakdowns. You begin to see their purpose. When a storm destroys the forest, new seeds awaken. When an old belief crumbles, new understanding blooms. Even heartbreak, when seen with enough time, rearranges you into someone stronger, more open, more real. That is the final lesson. Not to build a fortress against chaos, but to walk through it with grace, to let life undo you, without losing faith in the reconstruction that follows, to realize that being human is not about mastering the world, but maintaining balance within it while everything shifts. When you learn to do that, even briefly, you stop seeking peace as an escape and begin to experience it as participation. One day, you'll look back and see that every rule, every failure, every return to order after collapse, it all formed a pattern too intricate to plan and too perfect to predict. The 12 rules were never about obedience. They were about awareness. They were the tools that helped you stay upright long enough to see that chaos was never meant to destroy you, only to remind you that you are alive. And as you stand there, in the quiet after the storm, you understand what every ancient thinker, every modern philosopher, every soul who has ever sought meaning, eventually discovers that life itself is the balance, not the calm after, not the victory before, but the fragile luminous tension between what breaks and what builds. You breathe, chaos and order in one motion. And that is enough. You live, uncertain, imperfect, awake,